When I was in high school, I was madly in love with the head cheerleader, and for a while I thought she loved me. We were each 18 years old. I thought we were the perfect couple and knew we were destined to be together for the rest of our lives. Throughout the school year, you couldn't put a piece of paper between us. That's how close we were. One evening in May, I happened to drive past her car in the school parking lot. I couldn't figure out why her car was parked there, because she was supposed to be with the cheerleaders at a baseball game that night. As I approached the car, it seemed to be shaking. Looking out the window, my world came crashing down. The love of my life was having fun with some idiot. As I raced down the road, wandering without purpose, some part of me considered jerking the steering wheel sharply to the right. There were plenty of trees I could crash into. But I didn't and headed home. Perhaps my folks would have some good advice on how to deal with my broken heart. When I got home, my parents weren't there. Instead, there was a note that they were going out on one of their dates and would be home late. It was as if a shroud of sadness had descended on me. I went into my father's office and tried the door of the gun safe. I knew it held his birdshot gun, a double-barreled Beretta 12-gauge, and a service pistol left over from his days on the police force. My father's precaution in locking up his firearms may have saved my life that night. I was that upset. Now, as an adult, thinking back on that night, I wonder why it affected me so much. But the teenage brain is not noted for its rationality, and what seems insignificant to an adult can be overwhelming to an 18-year-old. I laid down on my bed, waiting for my parents to return, but fell asleep. I woke up the next morning, still dressed and covered with a blanket. When I opened the window shade, the light of the morning sun streamed into the room. It was a gorgeous spring day. As I walked down the stairs and into the kitchen, I saw my mom making breakfast and my dad reading the newspaper with an unchanging cup of coffee in his hand. You could tell from their looks and body language that the date night was a success. These two people still loved each other after 25 years of marriage. I was overcome with shame at the thought of how hurt they would be if, when they came home, they found the bloody, lifeless body of one of their children. The three of us spent the next hour talking. I was lucky to have that kind of relationship with my parents. I left the table with a deeper understanding of my own importance and plans for the near future. I didn't say another word to the girl. Any attempt by her to speak to me was met with icy silence. I thought about it, but I didn't even ask her to return the expensive necklace I had given her the previous month for her 18th birthday. A necklace I had spent a month's salary on while working part-time at the local grocery store. After a week of this treatment, she stood at my front door with tears in her eyes. My grandmother was in the house that day and opened the door. After listening to the girl's pleas, my grandmother simply said, "What are you waiting for, young lady? You've been caught having fun with another guy? My grandson is not going to stand by and make a fool of himself. You better get on with your life because Jeff did." With those words, she closed the door. It was too late to find a date to prom. My ex-girlfriend went with that creep. I don't know if they had a good time at the dance, but their classes after prom. When he got them replaced, I'm sure the sugar in the gas tank may have further delayed their fun. This story had a lasting impact on me. I became a little colder, less emotional, and vowed to never be a jerk again. More than one blossoming love interest was cut short when I felt a girl couldn't be relied upon for fidelity. 10 years later. Jeff, what the hell is this? My wife, Emma, stood over my chair, holding a piece of notebook paper in one hand and a used book in the other. I hadn't had time to read this book, recently purchased online from a used bookseller, and it was sitting in the bookcase with the others on my to-read shelf. For some reason, I ignored the paper and focused on the book because that's what I thought she was asking about. But I was puzzled because Emma never gets upset when I buy books. In fact, she usually reads and appreciates the books I choose. It's The Wrong Man, James Neff's comprehensive investigation of Sam Shepard's trial for the destruction of his wife. You know, The Fugitive. Now it was Emma's turn to be perplexed. "Not the book, mister?" She shoved a notebook sheet under my nose. This. She was practically screaming now. I tried to take the paper, but Emma seemed reluctant to let go of it, as if it were something important. But finally, she let it go. I got up from my leather reading chair, put aside the Kafka's The Trial I was reading, and read the words on the paper. They were handwritten in a distinctly feminine cursive. Jeff, you need to divorce that witch you're married to before she drives you so crazy that one day you destroy her. I will wait for you, but not forever. Your love. Daddy. Postscript. Just so you know, we had fun one last time until I see the divorce papers. Signed. I reread the note twice, trying to make sense of it all. Could this really be someone's joke? I looked up from the note and saw the fire in Emma's eyes. Emma, I have no idea who this is from or what it means. Where did you find this? Emma held out the book to me. It was in your book. Don't play dumb just because you were too stupid and left it there. I spent the next half hour trying to explain that the book had been bought online and I hadn't had a chance to look through it. The note must have belonged to the previous owner, but what are the odds that the owner's name matches mine? Speaking of a perfect storm, the timing for this couldn't be worse. First off, I made the mistake of getting close to a female coworker in the office last year. Sharon Roberts and I flirted a bit, and it ended up going out to dinner one night, our first dinner together. Sharon cut to the chase and proposed to me. I was tempted. It was a time when my marriage to Emma was at its lowest point. We were both spending too little time on marriage and too much time at work trying to woo our bosses. Plus, Sharon was like a dream come to life. I didn't give in to temptation, but Sharon's offer stirred reality and conscience in my stupefied brain. I knew I had to go home and fix my marriage. I loved Emma. When I got home that night, I told Emma that we needed to fix what I thought was broken, but I had made a huge mistake in admitting my near intemperance. Things hadn't been smooth sailing for a few weeks, but I'd managed to convince Emma that she was the only woman in my life, and she seemed to believe me until this evening when Emma found the note in the book. Second, I had been working more in the office for the past 3 months. It was justifiable. I was looking at a nice bonus and possibly a promotion if I could complete the current project on time and on budget. I had a number of good reasons for wanting this promotion, but one of them overrode all others. It was no secret that Emma's parents believed she had married a man below her station. Emma's father was a CFO at the largest independent bank in the state. He went to an Ivy League school. Emma's mother was a graduate of Vassar University. Emma went to Princeton. I graduated from Kent State University. My MBA from Wharton hardly made a difference in her parents' world. Had I been promoted, I would have been on my way to the top by now. But lately, time away from home had become a point of contention. Third, Emma has been spending more time lately with her mother, a woman who has never warmly regarded me or my relationship with her daughter. Last week, Emma and I had a pretty big fight about time spent at work. Words were said, and unpleasant ones on both sides. But the worst part was that when Emma said that her mother was right about me, that I was a cheat and unworthy of her, I called her mother a witch. Yes, I used the same word the author of the cryptic note used to describe Jeff's other wife. Could this nightmare have gotten any worse? Yes, it could, and it did. Now you, the reader, are probably questioning the accuracy of my story. Many of you, and almost all of the women reading, are thinking, give up, you've been caught. But I swear I'm innocent. I ended up falling asleep on the couch, never being able to convince Emma that the note wasn't mine. Emma locked our bedroom door. On Thursday, I went to work and told my boss that I needed to give up a little extra hours. He has divorced himself and said he understood me. I brought Emma a bouquet of flowers. At least she didn't throw them in the trash and even thanked me when she put them in the vase. We slept together that night, but the frost in the air persisted. By Friday evening, things still hadn't thawed out. Emma decided to spend the weekend at her parents' house. That wouldn't help. I asked Emma not to go, but she said she needed time to cool down and think. I almost said that her mother was the last person she should be with to cool down and think about it, but I knew enough to keep silent. No sense in turning her against herself, which always happened when it came to her in-laws. I spent the weekend looking at those flowers and thinking about what would help repair my marriage. I took long walks with our dog Samson and thought a lot about how much I really love Emma. Saturday night, I sent her a text. Would you consider counseling? The reply was short. We'll talk when I get home Sunday night. Sunday came and went. Sunday night, I received a second message. Drank too much at dinner. We'll be home Monday. I started to get angry. I was innocent, damn it. I knew a weekend at her mom's was a bad idea. On Monday, Emma came home early in the morning, just before I left for work. I got an unconvincing kiss and a "I'll talk to you tonight," after which she ran upstairs to change for her job. I worked a full day on Monday, but left work in time to make Chinese takeout in time for her to get Chinese food ready by the time she walked through the door at 7. The meal was quiet, not friendly, but relatively polite. We opened the fortune cookies, I poured a couple glasses of aperitif, and Emma started the conversation. Jeff, I don't trust you, and that's not the best attitude to have toward your husband. Mom says I should suck it up and leave. Let's leave your mother out of this conversation. You know she never liked me. Let's limit it to what you and I need. I need space and time to think. I suggest you move into the spare bedroom until we get everything sorted out. I hated that idea. What married couple solves problems by sleeping in separate rooms? What about what I suggested? Counseling? Maybe, but not right now. Right now, I need time to think for myself. I couldn't help myself. Does think for yourself include your mother? My mom only wishes me well. If I need to talk to my mom, I will. That was the end of it. I moved my stuff into the spare room and never got to sleep that night. Looking back, first, a little backstory. I met Emma when I was doing consulting work for a non-governmental organization, NGO, where she was an intern. It was the year after I graduated from Wharton, one of the Big Four accounting firms hired me, and after my first year I was assigned to help the NGO with their computer systems. It was a pro bono job. Our regional manager was on the NGO's board of directors, and I was assigned to them for the duration of the change. In the end, everything turned out well. The NGO got a new server system and I met my future bride. Emma Taylor would be a senior at Princeton in the fall and would spend the summer as an unpaid intern. The more time I spent with this woman, the more I fell in love. We dated throughout that summer. Emma was smart, confident, and best of all, had the body and face of a Victoria's Secret angel. Although Emma came from an upper-class background, I was particularly impressed with how well she treated everyone in the office, from the mail clerks to the president. There was always a please, thank you, or other kind word. Physically, Emma was out of my league. I'm a good-looking guy and big enough to play the edge defender position at Kent State. Emma at 5'10" looks good next to my 5'10", even when she wore her 5-inch heels. Where we diverged was in social status. Emma was an only child in a two-family household whose backgrounds were not usually the same as my more middle-class parents. My mother taught second grade at a Catholic school, and my father owned a mechanics store. I am one of 4 children, all graduated from college, and all were fairly successful middle class. Mom and Dad were rightfully proud of their children. Dad and Mom instilled in us a work ethic that helped me succeed. After only 2 years at the accounting firm, I was hired by one of our clients. We had just completed a successful consulting job with TMG2 Engineering, Inc., and had saved the company millions in the transition from mainframe to server-based computing. TMG2 offered me the job because I didn't have to travel and the pay was comparable. I still work at TMG2, now as a project manager in the information technology department. My project at the time of writing this story was to migrate our systems to the then new concept of cloud computing. Few companies of our size had moved to the cloud. I had to convince the board to do so, and if it worked out as I expected, and if I promised the board, I had a chance to get the proposed position of CIO. Until now, the IT department had been run by the CFO, and he had been a strong supporter of the new position. Tuesday morning, I woke up in the spare bedroom. It took me a few moments to get my bearings, but when I went downstairs, the coffee was ready. Emma was upstairs in the shower. I considered joining her for a moment, but decided to give her the time she had asked for. After drinking a cup of coffee, I headed to the guest bathroom and began to get ready for work. All week, the relationship remained strained. Emma had been spending long days at work, so I decided to do the same and get back to my project. I think my boss was pleased. He probably thought my marriage problems were solved and I didn't give a hoot. Friday afternoon, I sent Emma a text. Can I take you out to dinner tonight? You pick the restaurant. 10 long minutes later, I got her reply. Going to my mom's, spending the weekend. This was ridiculous. I immediately called her and she politely replied. How can we work on our marriage or your trust issues if you're not home? I told you I needed time. It's only been a week. You have to respect my wishes. I tried my best to remain calm and made my case to her for staying the weekend, but all my arguments went unheeded. She finally agreed to consider my third request for counseling. Will I see you before you leave for Manhattan tonight? No, I've already packed my bags. I'll probably be back Monday night. I'll stay the weekend and go straight to work from New York. Another weekend, just Samson and me. 2 more days of me trying to figure out how to fix what was broken. On Saturday, I had an idea. I found the number of the used bookstore where I'd bought The Wrong Man and talked to the salesperson. "Hello, I bought a used copy of The Wrong Man from your store. You shipped it to me 3 weeks ago." Inside was a romantic note written by someone named Jeff, which is also my name. My wife found the note and is accusing me of having an affair. I need to speak to Jeff, who the book belonged to. The salesman had the nerve to laugh. "Man, what are the odds? A book called The Wrong Man, owned by 2 guys named Jeff, and even with a love note inside." The clerk was pissing me off. "Look, this isn't funny. My wife needs assurances that I'm not the Jeff who got the note from this woman. Does your system track buyers and sellers?" "Yes, if the guy is registered with us. A lot of people who sell us their used books have accounts and are in our system. But I can't give you a name or phone number. What if you take my name and phone number and contact the other Jeff and ask him to call me?" "I can do that. What's your name so I can trace the book?" "Jeff Parker." "As in the author?" I was puzzled. "What author?" He laughed again. "T. Jefferson Parker. He writes mysteries." This conversation was idiotic, but I had to ask. "What does the letter T stand for?" "I don't know. Maybe Thomas's?" "Your guess is as good as mine." "I've never heard of him." "I don't read fantasy mysteries." "All right, forget that Parker guy. I'm Jeffrey Parker, not Jefferson, and I don't have a T in my name." I gave him my phone number and was pleasantly surprised when my phone rang 20 minutes later. "My name is Jeff, and I'm told you have a found note written to me. Is this some sort of blackmail?" "No, it's not blackmail. I bought a book called The Wrong Man's that belonged to you. Inside was a note from a woman named Terry. I need you to tell my wife that the note was written to you, not me." "The note was in a book?" "Hell, I've been looking everywhere for that stupid bitch's note. If my wife found it, I'd be dead. I can't believe it ended up in that book." "Jeff, pay attention. I need you to tell my wife what happened." "No way." I dodged that bullet. "Terry is past it, and I'm still married, and I'm going to keep it that way." He hung up. It took me 5 minutes to calm down and gather my thoughts. I dialed the number that popped up in the received calls log on my cell phone. It answered. "Hello?" "Jeff, it's Jeff. I've changed my mind. This is blackmail. If you don't send me a notarized statement that Terry sent you a love note, your wife will get a notarized letter from me with a copy of Terry's note. How's that sound, man?" "That's cold." "Probably not as cold as it's been in my house since Terry's note was found by my wife." Okay, but you'll promise it's over, right?" "I promise. Just send a statement, remember? It has to be notarized or my wife won't believe it. Here's my address. Don't hesitate, get it done early in the week." Looking back, 2, becoming lovers. Emma and I were working for an NGO and had only been dating for 5 weeks when we first made love. By the time the summer was over, Emma and I had become very exclusive. During her senior year, I spent most weekends driving 60 miles to Princeton. We spent Thanksgiving at her parents' apartment near Central Park. While she wasn't openly hostile, the coldness coming from her mother was obvious, but I figured I would eventually win her over, most people reacting positively when I tried to befriend her. Emma spent the winter break with me visiting my parents. Emma showed no signs of discomfort during the week while we visited my parents' house, a small but cozy craftsman-style home popular in their Columbus suburb. My parents loved Emma, and she reciprocated their affection. Emma's parents didn't put up any obstacles as long as we dated during her senior year of high school. In retrospect, I think Lois and Jonathan Taylor assumed that this was her fling. I was her first exclusive relationship that lasted more than a few months. Their approach was to sit back and let things fade away naturally. This approach had always worked in the past, and there was no reason to believe it wouldn't work for the weirdo from Ohio. By June, we were engaged. With a decent income and a relatively stable schedule at TMG2, I asked Emma to marry me, and she agreed. Emma appreciated that we would be living in Philadelphia, and visiting her parents in Manhattan would not pose a hardship. Now that I had proposed and Emma had said yes, her mother panicked and began lashing out at Emma to get her to change her mind. Emma confronted her mother, insisting that I was the one, and she was getting married. Eventually, her mother agreed, helped plan the wedding, but never stopped trying in very subtle ways to undermine our marriage. I didn't realize how serious she was until much later. Her parents' attitudes have complicated my choices lately as well. Should I be free to spend more time with my wife, who is now pursuing her career? Or should I spend that time working to become a C-level manager in her company, earn a position and income she could be proud of, and perhaps show her parents that she had not made a mistake in choosing me as her husband? This is the same choice that many young professionals face. Not many find the perfect balance. Emma's mood had not improved by the time she returned Monday from her parents' home after that second weekend. I decided to wait for an email from the other Jeff before approaching her and continued to sleep in the guest room. I also did something I swore I'd never do: read her email. While Emma was showering and getting ready on Tuesday morning, I opened her laptop and logged into her email program. There were too many to read in a short period of time, so I plugged in an external hard drive and dumped the contents of her inbox and other folders. Of course, like most computer users, Emma didn't delete the emails after deleting them. I managed to read 2 emails from her mother before I turned off the laptop and knew that further reading would lead to some interesting revelations. After Emma left for work, I spent an hour reading. I hated to violate Emma's personal space, but there wasn't much choice. Her mother and I were waging a war on Emma's mind and our marriage all fair, right? Plus, the emails proved that I was right to be concerned. In one of them, her mother urged Emma to transfer to her company's New York office and move to the city. There was also a letter from some guy, Grant Martin, talking about a dinner party at her parents' house they were both attending and wanting to start corresponding. As cold as our relationship was, reading Emma's letters gave me hope for our future. In response to her mother's sarcastic comments, Emma professed her love for me and her hope that our marriage would survive. Her mother was equally adamant that there was little hope. In several letters, she mentioned my confession about Sharon Roberts, essentially telling Emma that I must have cheated on her with Sharon, and who knows how many other women, including this last one, referring to a note from Terry. Emma's only email to Grant Martin was in response to his email. She reminded him that she was married, hoped our marriage could be saved, and asked him to respect her wishes to be left alone. Tuesday, I spent my free time reading all of this. Tuesday night, I came home in a good mood, which only improved when I checked the mail. There was a letter from the other Jeff. He must have really wanted this to be over. I opened the envelope, and there was a notarized statement confirming that he was the same Jeff who owned the book and left a note inside from Terry. He even apologized for the trouble it had caused. Emma came home that evening where grilled steaks, a salad, and a bottle of Merlot were waiting for her. We ate before I handed her a letter from the other Jeff. When Emma read the letter, her eyes clouded over. She got up from her chair, sat on my lap, and kissed me. "That makes me very happy, Jeff. Almost as happy as I am to have you back in my arms. It's been too long. Would you like a glass of wine?" "Yes, Jeff. There should be a bottle of Chardonnay in the refrigerator. Would you mind pouring me a glass?" "Sure. Is there any water?" "No, I don't want to urinate all night. Just wine, thanks." I went down to the kitchen, poured her some wine, and got myself a beer. I set the wine on the nightstand. I could see the determination on Emma's face as I lay down next to her. "You don't know what it's like, Jeff. Wondering if your mother and father love you or if you're just another fashion accessory of society. Think about how differently you were raised. How your mother and father accepted me into their lives, even when I first met them. Then compare that to how my mother and father treat you." I interrupted her. "They never liked me." Emma gave me her look, the same one she gave me when I interrupted her. "You think it's just you? How many times have you seen any warmth toward me, their own daughter?" I had to admit it was rare, but assumed it was a reaction to her marrying me. I remained silent and nodded for her to continue. "Now imagine you're a young girl and your parents react this way to your presence. And when you turn 10, they send you to boarding school. I never thought they didn't like you. I only assumed they were treating you the way they've always treated me, with cold indifference. Tell me, Emma, what has this to do with our love and marriage? Why has it suddenly become important to you?" "Because 3 or 4 months ago, my mom called me and we went out to lunch. Mom said she wanted to build the relationship and was sorry that we had drifted apart. She threw an emotional lifeline into our relationship, and I'll admit I wanted that. Since then, she and I have spent more time together. She told me how proud she was that I graduated from Princeton with a bachelor's degree and was very complimentary of my career. I told my mom that we were thinking of starting a family. Admittedly, she advised me to wait. My mother said that was what caused her career to crash when my father insisted she get pregnant. She thinks she was too young to have a child, and that's one of the reasons we were never close. She blames her father for this and says you are doing the same thing to me, making me lose my individuality and fulfillment. I was struck by that last statement. Emma, that's too ironic. Last year, you were the one who talked about starting a family. When I hesitated, you decided we should get a dog to test our paternal instincts, as you put it. We got Samson, and I realized a few months ago that we were ready, that we would make great parents. And now your mom says I want you to get pregnant and walk barefoot in the kitchen? She didn't say that. It's the same thing. Emma, it sounds like Lois is driving a wedge between us. Yes, we talked about starting a family. I started to raise my voice, which is never a good thing. Emma responded. Mom only wants what's best for me. For the second time in 2 weeks, Emma uttered those exact words. I was reminded of the movie The Stepford Wives, in which all the wives were dutiful slaves to their husbands. Was I suddenly dealing with a Stepford daughter? I need this, Jeff. I need a relationship with at least one of my parents. You've been spoiled your whole life. 2 loving parents, 3 loving siblings. I need a mom in my life. I almost asked, what about us? But realized it was better not to ask, because in the mood Emma was in right now, she would take it as selfishness on my part. Besides, I had to be careful. The last thing I could afford was to give a tip on what I'd learned from reading her letters, but I had to ask. Is there someone else, Emma? Emma sat up and looked me straight in the face, her eyes burning into mine. Hell no, Jeff. No, I would never cheat on you. I had to defend myself. I'm worried about this whole weekend in New York. I'm worried because you're an attractive woman, and I know your parents have an active social life. I know that men are bound to like you and ask you out on dates. Was that too much to say? Emma's reply didn't sound suspicious. I've only been to one dinner party my parents threw last weekend at their house. One of my dad's co-workers was there, but you don't have to worry. He wasn't there as a setup. I remained silent and only responded by putting my arm around her shoulders and kissing her. My bottle of beer and Emma's wine glass were already empty. I turned off the nightlight and we exchanged I love yous. I rolled over onto my back and closed my eyes, hoping to get some sleep so I could at least forget my fears for a couple hours. So much for magical reconciliation, I thought to myself. The next night, I checked Emma's phone while she was making dinner. Damn, 2 calls from her mom today, and both lasted over 30 minutes. I was totally screwed. During dinner, I decided to take a chance. Emma, would you like to spend the weekend at the coast? I can get a room on Fire Island. Emma had the grace to make a guilty look. I'm sorry, Jeff. My mom called today and she has 2 tickets to see The Merchant of Venice with Al Pacino. She asked me to join her Saturday night. Can we go to the shore next weekend, please? Yes, of course. Next weekend. At least I slept in my bed again. We slept together, but we didn't make love. Thursday morning, I made my decision. I had the email addresses of my mother-in-law and Grant Martin, and with them the war was about to rage on. For what I did next, I would be fired, unable to work in any IT department, and possibly go to jail, if I got caught. I sent fake emails to Lois Taylor and Grant Martin. Both emails turned out to be from a well-known online business and contained a link that, when opened, would infect both computers with 2 different viruses. One virus would allow me remote access to each computer, and the other was a keylogging virus that would record everything typed on the keyboard, including user IDs and passwords. Grant Martin and Lois Taylor, like many other people who have been scammed, will never know that their computers were infected. Looking back, 3, marriage. Our wedding was as any person raised in high society would expect. Despite Lois Taylor's feelings for me and her hostility toward the union, it was her time to put on a show. My parents, brother, and sisters were there with their spouses and children, but we kept the other guests to a minimum. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor showed no such restraint. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry was invited and probably attended. What a farce. One thing surprised me to the core. Jonathan Taylor was leading Emma down the aisle. Tears seemed to be in his eyes. He gave her hand to me and for the first time said something directly to me. Quietly, so quietly that no one could hear him over the organ playing Mendelssohn, he said, "Please take care of her." That was all until he turned to sit next to the Ice Maiden, my new mother-in-law. The reception was being held at their country club. I tried my best to smile at all the phonies who showed up to suck up to my in-laws. I think my mom, dad, brothers, and sisters rolled their eyes often enough and hard enough to get whiplash. At one point, my dad, brother, and two of my sister's husbands cornered me. My dad said it best. "Jeff, Emma is a damn sweet and beautiful woman, but good luck with your new family." All four of us laughed, toasting to my happiness. The first few years of our marriage were wonderful. Ups and downs, but both Emma and I enjoyed success in our chosen careers and eventually managed to find a decent balance between work and fun. I suppose her parents had called a truce. Since we lived in Philadelphia, far enough away from Manhattan that constant interruptions were inconvenient, the truce held until very recently. Recently, we'd even started talking about kids. But being overeducated and overcompensated city dwellers, we did what every couple does in a similar situation. We got a dog to make sure we were ready for parenthood. Next came the big decision: rescue dog or pure breed. We spent probably as much time discussing our choice as we did buying our first apartment. In the end, we compromised, which meant we got a puppy that Emma fell in love with while spending a weekend traveling through Finger Lakes wine country. Samson was the friendliest of the litter, consisting of a Labrador mom and an unknown male dog. Of course, now I have to mimic all the other dog owners, companions, and go on for hours about why Samson is the smartest and sweetest dog ever, but let's keep it short and just say it's true. You'll have to take my word for it. After a year of living with Samson, we realized we were ready for kids. Emma was ready to drop the pill when the shit hit the fan. By Thursday night, Grant and Lois had opened my fake emails and both computers were infected with 2 viruses. I was now able to read all of their emails. What I learned blew my mind. Grant Martin was having an affair with Emma's mother. There were no heartfelt expressions of passion or love, just a few letters arranging secret meetings. I didn't have time Thursday night or Friday to dig through the various folders. I needed to focus on my project at work, but I did find a very important letter from Lois to Grant. Grant, I've enclosed with this letter the e-tickets for Saturday's play. Try to remember this isn't a date for Emma. You're just doing me a favor by taking Emma when I pretend to be sick on Saturday. Good luck, be as charming as ever, and she'll start to realize what a loser she married. Lois, I opened the attachment and found a PDF with 2 tickets for Saturday's performance of The Merchant of Venice. This email only added to the mystery. If my mother-in-law is having fun with Grant Martin, why is she setting him up on a date with Emma? I'm not usually known for my dodgy mind, so perhaps the answer was unfathomable to my straightforward brain. I decided to go to New York and find out for myself how far this could go. I set Samson up for an overnight stay at a local kennel and slept very soundly. The morning after Emma left, I took the Amtrak train to Manhattan and began to consider my options. I still loved Emma and thought there had to be some way to save our marriage. By the time I arrived at Penn Station, I had a plan of action ready. I bought a Yankees cap and baseball jacket, a cheap camera, and a bag of almonds. When I had 2 hours to spare, I walked into a grocery store on 43rd Street that served an excellent Reuben. I tried not to drink too much coffee or water. It could have been a long night. At 6:30, I sat on a park bench across the street from her parents' house. I hadn't been sitting there more than 15 minutes when I heard a voice beside me. "What agency are you from?" I turned around and saw a pretty woman standing there. "What do you mean?" "Well, you're obviously keeping an eye on this building. I assume you're following someone." "So what detective agency do you work for?" "I don't work for an agency. My wife's parents live there, and I think she's planning to go on a date with another man tonight. I'm just watching to see if she'll go for it or not." "I'm sorry to hear that. But it explains why you're such a bad judge of character. Look, don't be so obvious, and what kind of camera is that? You'd have to be 20 feet away from them to get a single clear shot." She unzipped her coat to show me a nice Canon with a zoom lens. "Here, step back to me. When you see your wife, point at her. I'll take a couple decent pictures for you." "Why would you help me?" "For the $100 you'll give me when I email them to you." "Believe me, they'll be worth your money." "What makes you think I'm following someone?" Because a quarter of the residents of this part of the park are private detectives keeping an eye on one of those 4 buildings across the street. Plus the Yankees cap. All the private detectives who come to town take a Yankees or Mets cap, thinking that's how they'll fit in. I took you for a small-town PI, chasing a deadbeat wife. But I didn't think you'd turn out to be an asshole husband. Her words hurt, but she continued her monologue. This part of town is a hotbed of crooks and a gold mine for detectives. Too much money and too little morality. Everyone here is entitled. I'm watching the building next to yours, waiting for some rich lawyer to walk out the door with his mistress. His wife is out of town and hired us to get some evidence of what he's up to. Perhaps he has a prenup. I'll still be here tonight to capture the 2 of them coming back from dinner. It's going to be a long night. She held out her hand. I'm Karen with an E. I watched Emma's building while my new friend talked. Men and women were going in and out, the doormen opening the front door and the doors of cabs or limos for the tenants. I didn't know what Grant looked like, so all I had to do was wait for Emma to come out of the door and see who she was with. As soon as Karen finished her introduction, Emma came out with a man I assumed was Grant. There they are. Karen picked up her camera and clicked the shutter a few times. She was so damn fast. She must have gotten at least 4 shots before they got in the cab and drove south. Gotcha! Now what? Now I focus on the building next door. From what I can tell, it's a little early for them. Let's go over here and sit for a minute. We went and sat on a park bench across from the neighboring building. First things first. If you send me your email address, I'll send pictures. It'll cost you $100. If you want, I'll take some pictures when they come back, and if I can get them, are you willing to part with another $100? Sure. Okay, here's the thing. If you give me the asshole's name, for another $300, I'll do a little digging and give you a little information. If we do that, we have to sign a contract to make it legal. I'll sign a contract with your agency? No, I'm a freelancer. Today I'm working as a contractor for the agency the lawyer's wife hired. And it's okay for me to hire you and not the agency? Yes. As long as it doesn't interfere with my contract work, I can mind my own business. It's not a conflict. I texted Karen my email address and Grant's full name. We chatted for a while. For some reason, I told Karen the whole background of why I was trying to save a marriage that seemed to be in deep shit. Karen turned out to be a great listener. My curiosity got the best of me. How did this petite lady end up as a private investigator? My preconceived notions, based on my love of film noir and 40s detective movies, had me envisioning Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe. Karen laughed when I asked my question. I spent 15 years with the NYPD, the last 6 years in the intelligence division, working counterterrorism. I was shot in the leg, lost everything below the knee, and ended up on disability. She bent over and pulled up her pant leg. Hell, it was a prosthetic. Decided to use what I learned to make some money, but also set my own work schedule. It's working out so far. I rarely work weekends like I did today. This was a special favor for a friend at the agency. As she spoke, Karen pulled out her camera again and started snapping pictures of the couple getting into the limo across the street. Are you going to follow them to the restaurant? No, it's probably not the kind of place where you can get something without getting caught. I'll grab a bite to eat on the next street over and then sit here and wait for them to come back. 9 times out of 10, these couples have dinner and then go back to the love nest for the night. Not much romance in these cases. So what does the mistress get besides food? You'd be surprised. Some of these women earn as much as a good secretary. You just have to be willing to sell your soul. No thanks. What about the wives? Probably half our business. Some poor guy working 60 hours a week ends up guessing that some clown gets most or all of what should be his. Want to know the worst cases? It's when the DNA comes back and the kids turn out not to be his. It always ends in nuclear war. I once had a client who broke into his ex-wife's house, sat on her bed, and blew his brains out. That must have touched her conscience. No, it didn't. That poor guy didn't know his wife was out of town. The body was found by the damn housekeeper. By the time the ex came home after a spa week in Cannes, the house was clean, the walls repainted. Not many happy endings in this business. We sat for another minute after that, me thinking deeply about whether my story was going to end badly. I wasn't going to blow my brains out, but if we divorced, I would miss my wife. Look, don't get me wrong. If you're going to get a snack, can I get one? She looked at me for a moment before answering. No, Jeff. Go on home. I'm going to meet my husband at the diner. I already texted him and he'll be there in 10 minutes. Karen pointed her ring finger. What a detective I am. I didn't even notice the ring. We got up from the park bench and started to walk around. I noticed now that I was limping a little. I guess I was fixated on myself, wallowing in self-pity. I decided to talk about something other than myself. It must be hard being married when you see all that ugliness. Does it affect your marriage? It affects a lot of my coworkers. Some can't deal with all the crap they see. I'm very lucky. My husband Bill knows what I go through at work. He does both small and big things to make sure I know I'm loved. Take tonight, for example. I know his mom is watching our 2 boys, so he can meet me here and have a quick dinner together. We kept walking and talking. As we approached the diner, I made out the silhouette of a large man. As we got closer, I realized that Bill was a very trim and handsome man. He was my height, but probably weighed at least 30 pounds, and it looked like muscle. Karen wrapped her arms around him and he leaned in to kiss her but kept his eyes on me. Bill, this is my new client, Jeff. Jeff, this is my husband, Bill. We shook hands, both of us looking into each other's eyes and doing a firm but not too strong handshake. Bill spoke first. Let me guess, tight end? Damn, you're good. Did you play? No, did heavyweight wrestling at Penn State. Bill's smile was easy. He turned, and as he hugged Karen, his smile widened and his eyes sparkled. Hungry? He asked me. No, but thanks. I'm going to head to the train station and take the train home. Karen, please send the contract when you can. I'll sign it and return it to you right away with the money. Thank you for taking my case. Is that the right word? Karen laughed. I shook Bill's hand. It was a pleasure to meet you, Bill. You're a lucky man, but I have a feeling you're both lucky. Take care and thank you for inviting me to dinner. You both give me hope. Bill looked at Karen, but she only whispered, I'll explain. I did leave with a smile on my face. Sunday morning I overslept. The lack of sleep over the past few days was making itself felt. After brewing my coffee, I started my laptop and plugged in my hard drive to download all of Grant's emails from his archived folders. I also decided not to wait for Karen to call me, but to contact her at a decent hour using the cell phone number she'd given me. I needed to know what had happened Saturday night after I'd left town. With a cup of coffee and a toasted bagel, I started reading the letters. One thing I realized was that Grant Martin was a weasel. Lois Taylor wasn't the only married woman he entertained, and one letter in Grant's outbox answered a lot of my questions. Dennis. It's time to return the favor. For the past 4 months, I've been entertaining an old high society matron. This bitch is so blue-blooded, she won't even look at anyone below her. Hence her willingness, given my pedigree. What she doesn't know is that my asshole father disowned me 5 years ago. You're probably wondering why I'm even following some old broad. 2 reasons. Her daughter's a baby. But this old lady is crazy. She's trying to ruin her daughter's marriage to some lowlife so her daughter and I can get married, and then this old cunt and I can see each other without anyone suspecting a thing. Can you believe that shit? You can't make this shit up. Did I mention I work for her husband and he's a brainless prick? The old bitch is encouraging her daughter to leave her husband, and I'm waiting for her to pick up the pieces. I can guarantee a very long engagement. The daughter will probably be a babe, but too conservative for my taste. And you know I'm not the marrying kind. At some point, this old broad will probably want to talk to my old man. That's not going to happen, and that's where you come in. I'm sending you a cell phone. Keep it charged. When I call, answer it and pretend you're my father. I'll ask her to talk to you. Don't overplay it. Just pick up the phone as soon as possible. Remember, I'm counting on you like you counted on me last year. Don't screw it up. Sorry to be James Bond, but I don't want to take any chances until I have a chance to make a decent buck. Did I mention this old broad is worth millions? Yes, you did. Your brother TKE. Grant. Reading that, I almost felt sorry for Lois, for less than a second, and then I realized I was dealing with a snake's nest. This was totally out of my league, and I was hoping someone with Karen's experience would help me figure out the next step. While waiting for Karen Grant's call, I connected to my computer and spent several hours on the internet, including logging into my work server and running several different programs. I watched and recorded everything he did. I now had his user ID and password at the bank. By 2 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore and called Karen on her cell phone. "Hi, Jeff. I've been waiting for your call. Sorry to bother you on a Sunday. Apologize to your husband and kids, but I need to know. What did you see last night when I left? You'll be happy to know that your wife showed up in the cab just after 10 o'clock. She got out of the cab and walked toward the door. Grant walked beside her and seemed to be trying to persuade her to let him in. She shook her head. He tried to kiss her, she turned away, and he only kissed her cheek before she walked through the door. The doorman must have gotten instructions because he didn't let Grant walk through the door. He turned away, but only after cursing the doorman. By then, the cab had left, and Grant must have already paid him back, rather cheeky of him. He must not be turned down very often. In other words, your fiancée didn't succumb to his charms. She got home at a decent time, and nothing untoward happened. Unless you count the fact that she went on a date with another man. I was glad Emma hadn't slept with that jerk, but I was still angry that our marriage was falling apart. Remember what you told me last night. She was set up by her mother. That doesn't excuse all of her behavior, but it does create a reason why she's acting this way. Okay, I agree. But this is something you need to hear. It sounds like Grant Martin is having fun with Emma's mom, and Lois Taylor is destroying my marriage to keep Martin around. No kidding, that's so cold. I've been in this business for years, and it never ceases to shock me how evil people can be. How did you find out about this? If I tell you, do we have some sort of client detective privilege? No, Jeff. If I get subpoenaed, I have to tell. So if you're doing something illegal, you have to decide if it's worth sharing. I thought about it and decided, what the hell, and told Karen how I'd gotten the emails. She, like many people in the past decade, was stunned. I also told her that I had Martin's user ID and password to access personal accounts and wire transfers. You can actually get a hold of this guy's computer and read his passwords? Hell, later this week you're going to have to teach me how to defend myself against the likes of you. In the meantime, I go back to my family, we're watching The Wizard of Oz, and the kids are giving me the, when are you going to stop talking on the phone look? Sorry, Karen. Call me tomorrow when you figure out Martin's biography, and I'll tell you the rest. With those words, we hung up, and I started digging through Grant Martin and Lois Taylor's email again. By Sunday evening, when Emma returned from her parents, I had tons of information, but I had no idea how to use it. Besides, all my clothes and other personal belongings were in the guest bedroom and bathroom. Not a few minutes later, she came rushing into the kitchen where I was sitting drinking a Yuengling. Jeffrey, where are your clothes? I ignored her question. How was your date last night? An expression appeared on Emma's face that I hadn't seen before. Guilt, horror, deception. What are you talking about? I didn't go on a date. Emma said it with such conviction that I might have believed her if I hadn't seen with my own eyes her getting into a cab. What do you call going to a play with an unrelated member of the opposite sex? Maybe look it up in the dictionary? There's that look again. Were you following me? Not that it matters, but I went into town yesterday. I was going to try to convince you and your mom that I should take you to the play, and I pulled up to their building just in time to see you getting into a cab with some guy. Who was it? Okay, I lied to her, but it sounded plausible, and I didn't want Emma to find out what I was really up to and what I really knew. Jeff, my mom got sick at the last minute, and one of my parents' friends was kind enough to drive me. Nothing happened. I played dumb. And who is this kind friend? Does he have a name? Grant Martin. He works for my father. I decided it was time to get her thinking. Look, Emma, this is bullshit. Your parents are trying to divide us. Think about it. I'll bet you $1,000 that your mother made a miraculous recovery on Sunday. This illness was staged. How did Grant Martin get free at the last minute? It's time for you to pull your head out of your ass and realize that our marriage is almost over. Emma jerked back on her heels as if she'd been shot. I didn't want this to escalate into screaming, so I took the opportunity to leave the kitchen and head for the guest room. It was a restless night, and I didn't get much sleep. I ended up getting up, leaving the house, and was at the office before 7. At 8, my cell phone buzzed with a message. Checking my phone, I saw that Emma had sent 2 words. Sharon Roberts. I guess Emma had already talked to her mother, and Lois was filling her head with nonsense. My marriage was rapidly circling the toilet, heading for the sewer. Late Monday night, Karen called me at work. "Are you somewhere so we can talk privately?" I closed my office door. "Yes, I'm in my office. What's up?" "First, tell me again about Grant Martin's position at the bank." I figured you already had it all down, so I focused on the non-work issues. I lowered my gaze to my notes. As far as I can tell from his emails and access authorizations, he's a personal banker. He mostly handles trust accounts and other money management for wealthy clients. Yesterday, I watched him read emails from 3 different clients, 2 of whom asked him to transfer funds from various accounts to other accounts. Grant created instructions for the wire transfers that transferred these funds as soon as the bank opened this morning. The money was supposed to be transferred this morning. I will be able to confirm this later today when I get to my computer at home. I don't want to use my work computer for that. Did any of those transfers go to foreign banks? One was to an account in France. Some rich kid was studying in Paris and his father sent money for tuition, room and board. Karen seemed to think for a few seconds, and there was silence on the line. Then she began to recount what she had managed to find out so far. I spent the morning gathering dirt on our friend. First of all, the guy was having problems in college. I haven't been able to figure it out yet, but it was so bad that his family practically disowned him. He moved to New York to get away from everything that happened out west. Then I talked to a friend in the NYPD. It turned out that last year a college buddy of Martin's had stayed with him for a long weekend. This buddy, Dennis Riley, picked up a young girl at a bar and brought her to Martin's apartment. The girl had a little too much to drink and asked Riley to call her a cab. Riley refused and began to impose on the woman. When Riley fell asleep, the woman left the apartment and went to the local precinct and filed a report against Riley. The police investigate, but Riley claims it was consensual. Martin supports Riley. Martin signs a statement accusing the woman. Martin even claims that the woman hit on him after Riley went to bed. He says that's why she was so angry. When it's 2 against 1, the DA refuses to press charges against Riley. The cops wanted to charge the son of a bitch, but the DA said it would be a waste of time and money. So this guy gets away with it because Martin confirms his version of events? About right. I picked up Grant's letter to Dennis and read the first sentence to Karen. Karen paused for a second before replying. Looks like Riley owes Martin a big debt of gratitude for lying to him. How do you feel about doing some damage to those 2 assholes? One who rapes a woman and one who lies to get away with it? No doubt about it. What's on your mind? Last night you told me how you managed to get hold of Martin's computer. How good are you? I mean, do you think you can open foreign accounts using his identity? Given his position in the bank, do you think you can transfer his clients' funds? I have computer technical knowledge, but no knowledge of how to open an account. And how illegal do you propose to make it? I don't want to be involved in the theft of funds. If we do it right, no one will lose money. I think we can wrap this guy up tight, but it's something we have to discuss in person. Can you meet tomorrow night? I'd like to bring a friend with me. Karen, I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Why are you doing this without any monetary gain? I agreed to pay you a few thousand just to watch Emma on Saturday night and dig up dirt on Grant Martin. Now all of a sudden we're opening accounts, transferring money and all that. What's in it for you? Because I can't afford to pay you more and I certainly can't afford to get caught or go to jail. This is personal, Jeff. Some asshole gave me something to drink and then took advantage of me. I was too embarrassed when I woke up to call the police or go to the hospital. When my roommate returned from her trip home that weekend, she found me crying in our room with no lights on. She convinced me to go to the hospital and the police. Unfortunately, by the time I was checked, there was no sign of it in my system. That was years ago. There are better tests now. I filed a complaint against the boy anyway, but it was he said, she said, and it didn't work out. So to answer your question, I'm doing this for that girl who was abused by Dennis Riley. She deserves to know that not every asshole gets away with it, and Grant Martin is going down for contributing to Riley. They're both scumbags. Karen's voice changed as she told her story. Obviously, it still caused her heartache. I had only known Karen for a few days, having spent less than 3 hours with her on Saturday night and on the phone, but I already knew that I would help her bring these scumbags to justice. As my grandmother used to say, Sometimes putting yourself on the line, even if you're breaking the law, is the right thing to do. Before we hung up, Karen told me to send everything I dug up on Martin's computer. Bank accounts, loans, mortgages, etc. I told her she'd get it all tonight. We arranged a time and place to meet on Tuesday night. I made an excuse to Emma that I was working late, but it didn't matter as we danced around each other, hardly spoke and slept in separate bedrooms. Tuesday night, I met up with Karen at a quiet pub. As promised, she had a friend with her. Karen introduced him only as Hank. If I had to guess, Hank was a former employee of one of the alphabet agencies, most likely from Langley. After I told Hank that I now had access to Grant Martin's computer and his personal and professional banking systems, he and Karen told me their plan. First, we buy an airline ticket to Dubai for Martin using his credit card. Second, open an account in Dubai for Martin. I'll give you instructions. Dubai is one of the most friendly havens for illicit funds since the Swiss got so much trouble from the US Treasury. Third, arrange for wire transfers of several million to accounts in Dubai to be sent early in the day. This is where I interrupted Hank and turned to Karen. Wait, I said no stealing. Hank answered for Karen. We will make sure none of the funds leave the country. You will make one very minor error in the instructions for transferring the money. That mistake will delay the transfer and it will look like Martin tried to steal but screwed up. Okay? I thought for a moment, then decided. Okay. So what's next? According to what you found, Martin has a line of credit on the house with over $100,000 unused. He also has another $60,000 in a brokerage account. Both of those accounts are going to be compromised. 2 wire transfers to an account in Dubai, but they'll go through without error. Do you have a problem with that? Not if it's his money going overseas. Good, if he's being milked dry on this side of the Atlantic, it'll prevent him from getting decent representation, which will go a long way toward helping us get his douchey buddy Dennis Riley in order. Karen took this opportunity to add the next step. And here's the final step. You send a letter from Grant to Dennis. Here, read this. Karen held out the proffered letter to me. Dennis. Forget rich old broad, I've got bigger fish to fry. By tomorrow, I'll be rich enough to last a long time, at least until I find another old broad with more money than brains. That means leaving the country, but there's nothing here worth sticking around for. In a way, I have you to blame or thank, depending on how things work out. I got a call today from some investigator asking questions about your adventure last year. You should have learned your lesson at the University of Southern California like I did. Get Sleet's approval before you spout that shit, because next time I won't be around to lie for you. I'll contact you and let you know where I land. I'm sure the feds will be monitoring this email after tomorrow, so don't bother responding. I will delete this letter as soon as it is posted. I suggest you do the same. Your brother TKE. Grant. I finished reading and looked up, smiling. From what I've read in his letters to friends, you've picked up on his style, especially his use of misogynistic language. What's this about the University of Southern California? Karen replied. I found out today why Martin's family disowned him. There were 2 assholes who took advantage of the situation. The girl had a few drinks at the party. She had a reputation for being easily accessible. The girl killed herself a week after the incident. The Martins paid the girl's family $250,000 to hush up the case, but also disavowed Grant for his involvement. Rumor has it that this wasn't the first time they'd kept Junior out of trouble with their money. Karen's story strengthened my resolve to put Martin and Riley away. Okay, with Hank's instructions I can do all that, but we need to make sure Grant is in his apartment and not at his computer when all this happens. How do we do that? Grant will be busy. Leave it up to us. Can you do it tomorrow night? No problem. What's going to happen on Thursday? We'll make sure Grant is arrested early Thursday morning, before he has a chance to look like he's going to work. It should look like he might as well be getting on a plane that morning. It's a pleasure to work with professionals. Both Karen and Hank were consummate professionals. Hank's guidance on each step led to the desired results. Grant opened a new account in Dubai. His credit card was used to purchase first-class tickets for a late morning flight to Dubai. The line of credit was set up, as was the brokerage account. The wires were due to ship Thursday morning. I picked one of Grant's wealthiest clients and arranged to have the $5 million transfer ready by Thursday morning. But there was one simple mistake in that wire. the wire never sent. How did they make sure Martin would be in his apartment all night? It was done with the help of an expensive escort that I assume Hank used in his former life working for Langley, or whoever. This hottie happened to bump into Grant as he was leaving work and convinced him that she should buy him a drink to apologize for being such a klutz. Grant, being a self-centered egomaniac, decided that it was his charming personality and good looks that convinced the young beauty to have one more drink in his apartment. That's where the experience in subterfuge came in. The woman said that she had once already been treated rudely by a guy who started out seemingly well. She swore it wouldn't happen again and demanded to see her ID. Grant decided, what the hell, and pulled out his driver's license. Everyone knows driver's licenses are bullshit. Half the people in this town carry a fake one, but just in case, show me your passport. If Grant had been thinking with anything other than his little head, he would have questioned the lady's logic. But he decided, what the hell again, walked to his office, opened his desk, took out his passport and held it out to her. She looked at it defiantly, even flipped through the stamped pages, making cute remarks. Oh, Spain, how great. I just love Ibiza. She closed the book, put it on the hall table, grabbed Grant's tie and dragged him to bed. Grant Martin opened his door at 8 o'clock Thursday morning to find two of New York's finest detectives on the other side. Despite his protestations of innocence, he was, figuratively speaking, tied up in a little bough. It didn't help that the two detectives noticed Grant's passport lying on a table in the hallway. Going somewhere, Mr. Martin? The detective asked, handcuffing Grant. Of course, Grant knew he'd been set up. He just didn't know who or how. No one he'd ever entertained had that knowledge, at least not that he could recognize. All traces of the viruses on his computer and Lois's computer had been erased from their systems. To make sure of that, I had sent a command to wipe his hard drive even before the police showed up that fateful morning. It looked as if Grant had done it himself to erase all traces of his crimes. Eventually, the police contacted Grant's internet service provider to get copies of his emails, and that's where they found an email to Dennis confessing to giving the cops a false statement and a fake email to Riley explaining his plans to leave the country with the illegally gained money. Karen's contacts at the police department turned out to be quite cooperative. They offered to drop the charges related to his previous false statement if Grant would testify against Dennis. Like the scumbag that he is, Grant went along with the deal, and Dennis Riley was extradited back to New York to face the charges. Of course, when Dennis found out about Grant's treachery, the two jackals turned on each other, and it was a delight to hear them cut each other to pieces. Grant Martin received no support from his family. Funny how his mother and father spent so much money to get him out of trouble when he was guilty, but didn't lift a finger when he was actually innocent of the crime. No matter how much he protested his innocence, he was found guilty of theft and other related charges. Grant Martin would spend the next 4 years in prison. With the help of Grant's testimony, Dennis Riley was sentenced to 10 years. By the time Grant testified, he and Riley hated each other so much that Grant was particularly outspoken. Grant's refusal to help, despite the woman's screams, did not reflect well on Grant, but the damage to Dennis Riley's defense was done. All of this happened over the course of the next year. While these events were unfolding, I had more personal issues to deal with. First, I needed to burn that bitch of a mother-in-law. On the afternoon of the day after Grant Martin's arrest, I made an appointment with my father-in-law. Mr. Taylor, I have some things to show you. Some of them will hurt Emma if I give them to her, if she believes me. Some might hurt you. I don't know you well enough to understand, but I'm sure you don't want your daughter to get hurt. So I am giving them to you to do with as you see fit. I have hired a private investigator to find out why my marriage has recently started to deteriorate. I have no idea how he obtained these materials, but I hope you will be as shocked by their contents as I am. I deliberately used only emails from Lois's account, not wanting anyone to know that I had access to Martin's computer, because he'd claim he'd been set up. Why back up his claims? Jonathan Taylor gingerly took the folder containing the letters from Lois to Grant from my hands. He leaned back in his chair and read for the next 15 minutes, interrupting his reading only to pour us both a cup of coffee from the carafe behind his desk. Maybe it's my inherent working-class snobbery, but I was impressed that he actually poured the coffee himself, rather than ringing some secret buzzer for the maid to come and do it. It wasn't the first time he surprised me that day. I think he did it to gather his thoughts, He looked particularly glum. After finishing the last page, he put the folder down and stared at me. I thought I asked you not to hurt my girl. Knowing that her mother used her in this way would hurt Emma. I'm sorry, sir. In that case, don't show it. I promise not to bring it up during our divorce. So you plan to divorce Emma? That would hurt her, too. Not my option, sir. Your wife seems hell-bent on ending my marriage to Emma, and right now she seems to be convincing Emma that it's the right thing to do. First of all, can we please stop with the sewer? My name is Jonathan and my friends call me Jack. I can assume you don't want to call me Dad, so could you start calling me Jack? I was stunned, but old habits die hard. Yes, sir. He looked at me and smiled for just a second and then asked, Tell me more about it because I can't understand how Lois suddenly became so controlling of Emma. What happened? I told Jack what I had learned over the past 2 weeks. Lois told Emma that she gave up her career for Emma. That she was too young when she married and had Emma, and that you forbade her from pursuing a career. She put a big fat load of guilt on Emma. I captured Jack's attention and decided to lay it all out in the open. I'm sorry, but this next part may seem blatant. Emma doesn't think she had a relationship with you or her mother. When she saw the way my family socialized, she thought something was missing. All the trappings of wealth, riding lessons, schools in Europe, whatever, didn't make up for it. When her mother started paying attention to her, Emma jumped at the chance to have that relationship. I didn't know if I was out of line. Jack was hard to read, but I guess that's what makes him a successful businessman. He picked up a folder from his desk and suddenly turned into a real person. Do you have any idea what it's like to turn 60 and discover your life is shit? No, of course not. I'm just ranting now. Emma's mother gave up her career? What a joke. Only if they have openings for manicures and spa treatments. For years, I had to listen to her tell everyone about her dream as a young girl to play women's professional tennis. You actually have to play tennis well to make a living at it, and Lois, after 45 years of lessons, still can't make a backhand. All my adult life, I've spent 90% of my time working at this bank, doing everything I can to make it the most successful and reliable bank of its kind in the Northeast. That's the way I was raised. We were a different generation than you. Few of us are best friends with our wife. When we have free time, we head to the golf course to make connections that will help the business. I spend more time with my foursome of golfers than I do with my wife or daughter. And you know what? My wife wanted it. She showed no interest when I suggested she take golf lessons. She talked me out of it when I suggested taking up tennis. In fact, she said it would prevent her from improving. But until today, I had no real evidence of cheating. I was in blissful ignorance. Jonathan's candor shocked me, and all I could say was, I'm sorry I was the one who brought this to your attention. No, Jeff. I'm grateful to you for giving it to me. It's one thing to get a little love on the side. It's another to be so conniving that you're willing to sacrifice Emma's happiness to keep your lover around. And with one of my employees. Talk about tooting our own horns. Every day that little shit walked past me knowing he was having fun with my wife. Well, he won't be entertaining my wife for a while because he was arrested this morning for stealing from one of our clients and providing false information in a criminal case. If everything we heard from the police this morning is true, Grant Martin will be gone for a while. And Lois? Well, unfortunately, Lois has her own trust fund worth millions, which pretty much works in my favor in the divorce. She'll park her ass at the spa or on the tennis court crying crocodile tears. Some Lothario will pick her up and I'll be easily replaced. She will lose a bit of social status. Some other wives will avoid her because they will be defending their territory. In this world, we live on a dog-eat-dog basis. She'll also lose her relationship with her daughter, but from what I've read here, Jack picked up the folder, she probably won't care much about that. And Emma? I wonder if it's too late to start a relationship with my daughter. I love her, I really do, but I let her mother control our relationship. Another thing I owe Lois for. By God, I have to find a way to make Lois pay for all the pain she's caused. Maybe not right away, but somehow. In the meantime, Jeff, I want to ask for your help. You say you love Emma. If you can look past that, do you think you can repair your marriage? I don't know, sir. I mean Jack. Logically speaking, what happened is not her fault. She was manipulated by her mother. And it helps that she didn't get into bed with Martin. At least I don't think so. But emotionally, that's the hardest part. I'm not like you. I just showed you proof of your wife's infidelity and duplicity, and you didn't shed a tear. You were a little angry, but you kept your cool. I, on the other hand, when Emma walked out the door that second weekend, I cried for the first time in my adult life. I don't know how you do it. Jonathan Taylor looked at me and made a decision. Because I started locking my emotions in a bottle over 40 years ago. Let me tell you a story that not many people have heard. When I was fresh out of college, I enrolled in Navy flight school. It was tough, but I passed OCS. I was so proud of myself the day those stripes appeared on my uniform in front of my parents. I was going through flight training when my life became a living hell. I messed up and crashed. Broke both legs and my back, and my radar intercept officer, Ted Andrews, was killed. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital. When I was able to walk without crutches, I went to Ted's parents to apologize. I will never forget their faces as they looked at the man responsible for their son's death. I returned to the base a broken man. I cried for days. I was useless to the Navy. They gave me an honorable discharge and sent me home. My parents were kind. They placed no additional blame on me. They sent me to Harvard so I could get my MBA and put it all behind me. But not a week goes by that I don't think about what I should have done that day to prevent the accident. I wasn't drunk or hungover or anything like that. It was just a mistake that cost a man his life, and it was my mistake. Ted's parents never wanted to hear from me again, but I've dedicated part of my life to his memory. In addition to my volunteer work, every year I make a $10,000 donation to the USO and one of Gary Sinise's funds for wounded soldiers. So amidst all that, a whore as a wife seems like a small thing. I listened in silence, and when he finished, I looked at my father-in-law. I saw a man with a huge weight on his shoulders that he had been carrying for far too long. I knew there was something I could do to lessen that load, and I realized what I was going to do. One last look back, meeting Emma. As I navigated the circumstances, it's important to remember how much Emma's recent behavior has been out of character. This can only be attributed to her need to finally connect with her mother, which never showed the normal mother-child love between mother and child. My thoughts went back to the first conversation I had with Emma that summer 8 years ago. In between my NGO duties, I was walking past Columbus Square when I noticed a familiar face sitting on a bench. The young woman, whom I recognized from the office, looked like she could use a friend. I took a chance and approached her and introduced myself. "Excuse me, I've seen you in the office before. I'm Jeff Parker. I work in the Information Technology Department." I held out my hand. The girl looked into my eyes. There was a sign of recognition in them, but it was also obvious that she was crying. I felt embarrassed for disrupting a possibly private conversation. Instead, a hint of a smile appeared on her lips. "Yes, I saw you there. I'm Emma Taylor." She took my hand. "May I sit down or do you want to be alone?" "No, please have a seat." I took another chance. "It's obvious you've been crying. Would you like to share?" Emma paused for a second. "Did you hear the news today about the 2 girls in Sudan?" One of the charities the NGO supported ran schools for girls in Sudan and other African and Middle Eastern countries. There, the girls were taught to read and write, as well as domestic skills and health education. Teaching women these skills did not always endear them to the local population. "No, I've been in the bank with the servers all day. It's the first time I've been out of the server room all day," she said. Yesterday in Juba, 2 sisters were dragged out of class by the girls' grandparents. They were upset that the girls' parents allowed them to read and write, claimed it was a plot by the West to turn the girls against Allah. This morning we received a report that the sisters had been mutilated and had had their clitoris removed. All this was done with the approval of the local imam. I didn't say a word in reply. I had heard of this barbaric practice among some Muslim tribes, but I had never heard of it being applied to women until today. Emma began to cry again, but then went on. "What I cannot understand is how people who claim to follow a God can think it right to destroy what that same God created." She paused. "Do you think we're doing some good out there? Or are we just creating a bigger mess?" "I won't pretend to know the answers to your questions, Emma. But my grandmother taught me something when I was a kid. I was visiting my grandparents on their farm when a big thunderstorm hit. We saw a big funnel cloud, and the 3 of us tried to corral all their chickens into the barn. There were probably 20 of the 25 chickens in the barn when Grandpa closed the door and told me to go to the basement. I started to protest, not understanding why we were abandoning the homeless. Grandma set me straight. If you try to save everyone, she said, you'll probably end up saving no one. Emma looked at me with her beautiful eyes. She was really listening to me with interest. I think you could apply your grandmother's philosophy to what your organization does. Try to save as many of these young women as possible from a life without hope. You'll never save them all, but you shouldn't lose sight of the positives while you're saving as many as you save. Your grandmother seems like a wise woman. But what do you mean by you? Don't you work for an NGO? Not exactly. I am under contract with KPMG. When I am done converting systems, I will go on another assignment with another company. That's the life of a consultant. In 2 months, I could be in California or Virginia. It must not be easy to make friendships. I can't imagine such a nomadic life. I've only lived in 2 places in my entire life, here in Manhattan and where I go to school in Princeton. Even my prep school was 5 miles from the university. You use the present tense. Are you still in school? Yes, I have 1 more year left at Princeton. I'm here as a summer intern. Does that mean you're working here without pay? Yes, but that's not a problem. One thing my father believes in is community service. He gives me a decent allowance on top of paying for school. Money isn't a big problem. When I graduate next spring, I'll have a chance to try living on my own, but for now I'll have to focus on my studies and helping out here as an intern. That must be great. As soon as I said that, I realized how sarcastic it might have sounded to her, but Emma didn't put it out there. Yeah, and I won't deny it. I have friends at school who have to watch every penny or borrow money to pay tuition and rent. Having a disposable income takes away the need to be a student. As Emma spoke, I realized how different this woman was from many of the wealthy people I'd met in Wharton and beyond. Over the course of our 30-minute conversation, Emma expressed sympathy for 2 strangers in Sudan and for her classmates at school. I later learned that on the same day we talked in the park, Emma had been hit by a cab on her way to work. She had a large bruise on her thigh, but that wasn't talked about until a few days later. This was a woman worth knowing, but before I could say a word, she surprised me again. Jeff, since you said it's hard to make friends while wandering the planet, would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Of course I said yes, and so began our friendship with Emma. A friendship that grew into a relationship that is now jeopardized by her mother's evil meddling. Leaving my father-in-law's office, I took the train and returned home. An hour later, Emma walked through the door to find dinner on the stove, a bottle of breathable Merlot, and a dozen red roses on the table. It took her a few moments to notice the 3 sets on the table. I see we're expecting guests. Who? Your father. My father? What about my mother? Has something happened to my mother? Please tell me. No, nothing happened to your mother. Your father and I just want to talk to you about some things. Go wash up, he'll be here any minute. Thank goodness Jack rang the bell right away. I don't think I would have been able to restrain Emma for long. Perhaps my plans for a quiet dinner were naive. The wine was poured and the pasta was on the plates. But as soon as we sat down at the table, Emma wanted to know why her father was here without her mother. Jack fell on his sword and began to tell Emma what her mother had been doing for the past few months. Emma became hysterical, crying, "No, no, no, no," until Jack led her out from the table and sat down with her on the couch, and Emma cried on his chest. I cleaned up the kitchen and let them have some alone time. I took Samson for a walk. When I returned half an hour later, Emma met me at the door, her eyes still red. Jeff, I'm so sorry. Please tell me you want to stay together. Please, Jeff. I want to, Emma. I never stopped loving you and I never wanted to be your husband. My biggest fear was that you changed your mind and were going to leave me. I was so stupid, but I told you how important it was for me to communicate with my mother. Now that's over with. What about your father? My father wants to mend the relationship, but he's afraid I'll be wary of his motives, given what happened with my mother. We'll take our time, but first he wants me to work on the damage I've done to our marriage. Father will be going on vacation soon. He'd like to take us both to an island in the Bahamas for as long as we can be free from work. He wants to get to know us both better. That's great, babe. We'll work out the details later, but for now, that's just great. Come on, let's go try to eat. I heated up dinner in the oven. The pasta isn't al dente anymore, but I'm sure it will be delicious. The three of us sat down at the table again and took the first step on the long road to healing. Old habits die hard, and my father-in-law was not affected. Despite his best intentions to take a full 2 weeks vacation and spend it with us on the island, it took almost a year. In the meantime, he spent almost every weekend with us, bonding with a daughter he regretted never really knowing. Like me, when Emma and I first met, he was pleasantly surprised that she turned out to be such a lovely, selfless girl. Having Jack become involved in our lives helped Emma recover from her mother's betrayal. Emma and I spent those months putting the pieces of our marriage back together. It was made easier by the fact that Emma had never cheated on me or lost her moral compass. The night of the play with Grant was chaste. Not that Grant wasn't trying his best to make something happen, it was just that he ran into the wrong woman, something he wasn't used to with all the whores he usually tried to bed. We ended up spending a week with Emma and Jack on Cat Island in the Bahamas. Emma spent another 4 days after I left to be alone with her father, and I needed to get back to work because of new responsibilities. My project was completed on time and on budget. My reward was the coveted title of IT director, as well as a nice bonus and a pay raise. Speaking of bumps, Emma had to be convinced that she could still wear a bikini on the island, even with such a nice bust. Paul Jonathan Parker, named after both grandfathers, was born just over a year after that heated pasta dinner. Claire Emma Parker, Claire is my mother's name, was born 2 years after PJ. Jack retired when he turned 63 and does his best to spoil his grandchildren. He even bought a small apartment nearby that he uses as a second home. Things weren't so good with Lois. Jack had divorced her shortly after we'd met that Thursday afternoon. It had probably cost him a fortune in legal fees, but thanks to the evidence of her attempt to destroy his daughter's marriage with the involvement of her lover, and the fact that Lois had millions in trust funds, Jack had been able to walk away from Lois without paying her alimony and retain enough assets to keep his retirement comfortable. When news of Lois's duplicity became known to the society matrons, she became a pariah. Everyone knew she was a snake, but they didn't know how low she could sink. Lois moved to Palm Beach first, but her reputation followed her. She'd been denied membership in the local tennis clubs, and in her 9 months in Florida, she'd never made a single friend, not one pretend friend. Palm Springs was next in line, nothing like a few thousand miles to get rid of a bad odor. Although Lois had been allowed to join the beautiful people her millions might have swayed, she couldn't compete with the young wives for men's attention. Lois made the mistake of many aging women with low self-esteem. She went to a plastic surgeon. Unfortunately, she ended up looking like one of those crazy clowns with the weird smile and crazy eyes. I only know about the horror of her facelift because 2 years after Claire was born, Lois showed up on our doorstep. When I opened the front door, it took me a few moments to recognize the person standing on the other side of the screen door. I didn't even bother opening the door, I just spoke through the screen door. "Lois, what are you doing here?" The lack of friendliness in my voice couldn't have been more obvious. "I want to see my daughter and grandchildren." "Lois, you're not welcome here. No one in this house wants to see you or even acknowledge your pathetic existence. Now go away." It took every ounce of self-control not to scream. "You have no right to keep me from seeing Emma and the kids. Open the door." "Lois, you don't understand. I'm not preventing them from seeing you. Emma doesn't want to see you, and will do everything in her power to keep you from infecting our children with your anger." I started to close the door just as Lois was opening the door. I paused for a moment. Oh my God, what have you done to your face? It just came out of my mouth. Lois was stunned by my comment long enough for me to close the door in time. She doesn't give up that easily. The next day was Monday. Lois figured I'd be at work and called home. Emma later told me that their conversation was short and to the point. Emma confirmed that Lois was persona non grata in our house and around the kids. Lois offered Emma a carrot. If she could visit her grandchildren, she would receive $10,000 for each of the first 10 visits to their college fund. Emma refused the bribe. Lois showed up at the daycare center. That was enough to get us a restraining order. Lois tried to call Jack and ask for his help, portraying, "We were married for 30 years, blah, blah, blah." Jack laughed and hung up. Last we heard, Lois was back in Palm Springs and had gotten back together with some gigolo who had taken quite a bit of money from her. How sad. Sometimes bad things happen to bad people. It reminded me of my last action against Grant Martin. Using an assumed name, I sent Martin a letter. It was a short poem, only 8 sentences. It read, "He's innocent," your lawyer said. But the jury thought otherwise. For the crime that sent you to the bottom of the barrel. There are forces that come to the rescue. I'm innocent, you said again. But karma and justice went hand in hand. And now you realize, asshole, that you just screwed the wrong person. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.